Hey everyone, by the end of this video, you're going to know what self-sabotage is and ways to beat it. I'm Chris Crawford. I help people level up their mindset to focus on creating their calling, online businesses, things like that. So what is self-sabotage? The symptoms of it are things like, there's two different types, but essentially it's where we're getting in our way so that we're not creating the thing that we want to create. So if you've got things that you want to do, business you want to grow, there's certain things you know you need to do. Maybe it's about health, working out, things like that, and you're just not doing it, and over time you're sabotaging your own success. That's really kind of just a vague of what self-sabotage is. I'm going to go into a bunch of amazing details here that are probably going to open your eyes a lot to what it is, why we do it. So there's two real types to better explain it, right? There's conscious and unconscious. Okay, so this is super interesting. It's unconscious that's really the biggest killer, and I'll get to that in just a second. So conscious self-sabotage, I mean, that's kind of obvious, right? So it's, you know that you need to do something and you know you're not doing it, and you're doing something else, and the whole time you're doing it, you're like, oh my gosh, like, why am I doing this? Like, one area for me, maybe it's like going to bed early and being on your phone, and you know you should be going to bed, but you know you're looking at your phone and you're consciously sabotaging yourself, right? Or you know that you don't want to eat this crappy food or whatever it is, and you know that, and you do it anyway, so consciously you sabotage your own success, right? Procrastination, things like that, you're just avoiding it. That we're aware of it. It sucks, the feeling, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but when I'm doing it, it's like the worst feeling. And actually, that feeling is what led me to start to study mindset, self-sabotage, why we don't focus, all these kinds of things, and led me in a rabbit hole of learning all of this, learning mindset work, and I'll share a little bit about that in just a second. So unconscious self-sabotage. This is so crazy, okay? Unconscious is where we're sabotaging our success, but we don't even know it, right? And here's the trick. It often doesn't even look like self-sabotage. It actually just looks like other things. So here's what I mean. Common symptoms with people that I work with are studying all the time, right? They're always studying. Maybe they're learning skills. A lot of people in personal development world, I work with a lot of coaches and people like that are continually learning more tools, more coaching tools, more just tools to use, right? So it becomes a distraction from building the business they actually want to build. A lot of people do it with reading books, this whole read 1,000 books a year or whatever it is, 100 books a year, whatever. It's a distraction often from the thing we need to do. I'm a huge fan of reading on demand, like study the thing that we need to learn right now. But when we're just randomly reading books because people recommend it and we're kind of ping-ponging all over, it's a distraction. Going to events, can also fit in the course thing. Planning, I worked with somebody who would just spend so much time planning their day, and they wouldn't actually do anything. Like their productivity was nowhere. But because they were planning, it felt like they were actually doing something, right? And this is unconscious. The mind is so amazing because it tricks you into thinking that you're actually being productive. Like it actually makes you feel like you're doing something when you're not. You're not doing anything at all, right? Morning routines. This is one, I went so off the rail with morning routines. I got into this, I got to have the right morning routine, and I got to, meditate and exercise and visualize and, eat right and do it. And I would spend hours in my morning routine distracted from actually doing work. Now, yes, I think morning routines and things are key, but within reason. I mean, the thing is like, if you know that you need to sit down, you need to create a piece of content, you need to post something on social media, you need to do a workout, like if you know there's something you need to do, you're spending all this time in other things, like that's distraction, right? So the reason I started to study this, now I've got a great example of a person that I helped grow their business to over 50 million. I'll share that with you in just a second. But the reason I got into this is I was I was building a house. I had a successful business, and I just realized that I'd reached this level where I was not focusing. I wasn't being productive. And I remember one day I literally just asked the question. I was like, why can't I just do the things that I know that I need to do? Like, what is going on with me? Now, I don't know what you believe, but I have come to believe that there's a higher power of some sort, that when we ask a question, we focus on things, it will deliver, and it doesn't always deliver in the best way. Am I right? So, not long after that time, I went through some of the roughest times of my life. My business was losing money. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was losing a lot of money. I ran out of money on this house that I was building, and I got in this place of just stress and anxiety, and my first daughter was born. And we were living in 450 square feet. I would wake up in the morning with just so much anxiety, stress, and I was just freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But I had put myself in that situation because I wasn't doing the things that needed to be done, frankly. I wasn't focused on the business. I was distracted. I was in a comfort zone, and I just wasn't doing the work. So in a little bit, I'll share how I got out of that. Now, the other person's example, this one explains why we self-sabotage. Okay, why do we sabotage our own success? So I had a client come to me, and this is just the perfect example of how we sabotage her. So she comes to me, she's already got a business that's doing pretty well. And she's like, I'm just stuck at this level. I can't seem to get past it. She called it a glass ceiling. She's like, I can't get to the next level. I'm just stuck here. And I'm trying all these things and I don't know what's going on. So in our first call, now this is years after my why do we self-sabotage day, right? Because after that I learned all these mindset tools and all these different things. So I go into the call with her using these tools that I've learned. And pretty quickly what we discover is when she was a little kid, her parents judged wealthy people, right? So she grew up, she's little, and her parents are like, wealthy people are slimy, they're evil, they're no good, all these other things, maybe worse language. And they just had this negative opinion of wealthy people. So she grows up around that. So as a kid, she creates this belief that if she becomes really wealthy and successful, she's going to be judged by her family and friends and lose their love, right? So now as we explain it, there's kind of some logic in it. Like the thing that she wants most is their love and acceptance and relationship. And if they judged those people and she becomes that, she could be judged. We can logically kind of put it together, right? But fast forward 30 years, that was when she was, I believe, she would have, a whole stretch when she was probably under 7 or 8 years old. Now she's in her 30s and has no idea that she has this inside, this unconscious limiting belief that if she becomes really successful, she's going to be judged by people, she's going to lose their love. So her mind, so brilliant, her mind keeps distracting her from becoming wealthy and successful. Her unconscious mind. And her flavors, her ways of doing it, over planning. I had mentioned that before. She would spend all this time planning, learning new tools, new software, new planning tools, new business tools, all these things, reading tons of books, right into personal development, going to events, all kinds of stuff like that. Just all these different ways. And so it was like when she had all these productive, high quality ways of distracting herself from doing the work. Now, when she had her fill of that, she would spin into another zone where she would go out with friends and stay up late and have some drinks. She didn't do that very often because her identity was somebody who focused and work. But there's this pattern that we do where when we've had enough distracting one way, we'll flip over and we'll distract another way. And then she would beat herself up a little bit. And so she was just going in this pattern all over and her business was stuck. So the day that she realized that, she said it out loud and she kind of had this do I believe that? Is that true? She was saying it, she knew that she believed it, but it was so weird to hear herself say it. Now that's what it's like when we uncover unconscious beliefs. So that was unconscious self-sabotage, right? From limiting beliefs as a child. So for you, are things coming up right now? Are you thinking of ways that you sabotage your own success? Are you thinking of possibly people that you grew up around and maybe their limiting beliefs or fears or things became in you? Comment. I'd love to hear from you. What's coming up for you right now? So in a moment, I'm going to talk about how to beat it. Now, I've been doing this for a while, and I just see so many different patterns with people, and it is so fascinating to me. So when I was at this place of stress and struggle in my life, right, going back to that story of when I was just struggling so hard, and I was in this place, and I didn't know what to do. I had already been starting to learn these tools, but I wasn't mastering them, and I wasn't applying them in my own life, right? One of the reasons why I think reading a lot and studying a lot is not great is because often we're not mastering the things that we read, right? If you're somebody who's reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of things, how many of those things are you actually applying in your life, right? Let's get real about it. Let's get truthful. So I wasn't applying all the things I was learning. Now, one day I woke up, and I can just remember, I'm telling you, I would wake up and I just feel this anxiety. I felt stress. I'd feel burned out, like I wasn't rested. I just wanted to close my eyes and go back to sleep and shut out the world, right? Like it was just this stressful time. But I would open my eyes and I would see my new baby laying there and her mama. And I just had this like, I have no choice. Like I have to figure this out. And I didn't know what to do. Like it was bad. At the worst point, I was $150,000 behind on bills. Going into our slow season with overhead staff. I didn't have money to pay the staff. I was bouncing checks. I had suppliers calling. Like it was brutal. I couldn't even quit because it was so bad. Like even just quitting, I was like, I don't even know how to quit. Like how do I even get out of this, right? So one day I got up and I just sat on the couch. I just put my head down. I remember I was just sitting there like this. I just had my head in my hands. And I just started to imagine the future. It was just the silliest thing. Like I just started to imagine what would it be like? You know, what could it be like in a year from now if the business was profitable and all this was fixed? And I just started to just imagine this pretend future. And I just daydreamed about it. And what a fascinating thing happened. And it was so funny because I had to look back at this like a few years later, really at learning all of this to understand what happened at the time. So when I would visualize that, I would start to feel different. Like I didn't feel as stressed. I didn't feel the like anxiety. It was like I just started to feel something. I started to feel hopeful. I started to feel better emotions. And so I would visualize the business transformed. I visualized the house done. All this. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like picturing it, and then I'd open my eyes. Some days I might get a little workout in, and while I was working out, I would just keep seeing this vision, right? And then I would make a plan for my day. Now, I didn't go come up with any groundbreaking new plans. It was more just like the few things I needed to go and do that day. And I'd open my eyes and I would go about my day. That's it. That's all I would do. But here was the thing. I started to become more productive, and I was getting more focused, and I started to have better ideas, and I started to attract opportunities. Every day I would wake up, and it's not like I did it once and everything was cured. Like throughout the day, I would get stressed again. I would feel anxious again. Some days I would close my eyes again. I would just sit there and I'd see that. This was a low point, a really rough time. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd feel the anxiety and stress, and I would just I would just visualize, and I would just see it. I would feel it. I would go into it, and just slowly things started to change. Well, I say slowly, but actually it was pretty fast. In about 6 months, that business completely transformed. Now, I'd had it at this point maybe like 10 or 11 years, and it was, at one time it was a few $1 million a year business, right? The numbers don't matter. You could be in debt, $100, $1,000, $100,000. Like the feeling is the same, just that, right? Within 6 months, that business, I made the biggest changes that I had been avoiding. I did more work than I'd ever done before. I got the house finished. We attracted an opportunity to get some funding for the house. The business by the end of the year became the most profitable that it had ever been in the 10 to 11 years that I'd had it. And, within the following year, we were like, life was completely different. We were traveling. We were just at a completely different zone. But I realized it was all about this visualizations, right? So I started to play with this a little bit. I had a book that I wanted to write, and I'd been procrastinating it forever. It was just on my to-do list. I started visualizing that every morning, and I wrote a book. I wrote my first book in like 6 weeks. Like it just poured right out of me super fast. And I started using it to work out. I started using it in all kinds of ways. And then I started to share it with friends. And I had friends that were like struggling with focus and mindset. And I was like, here, and I recorded an audio for them. And the first day, one friend of mine came back. He's like, dude, this was amazing. Like this, I just focused. I feel good. Like, he's like, this is crazy. So from then, I just kept improving and refining and improving, and till this client that I told you about, working on it with her, she grew her business. She was 52 million after 2 years, which was a 400% increase. All over the place, huge results. This is a powerful way. Now, if you want to learn more about it, I've got other videos. I do free visualization, stuff like that. You can click it. There's probably a link, something like that. You can check it out. So that's a super powerful way. Another surprisingly powerful way to overcome self-sabotage, which we know is not really sabotage at all. It's actually more like a way of protecting ourselves, right? Because at some level, we're actually always getting what we want. That's a weird thing about it. Anyway, another way to overcome that that's really interesting is spending time around people that are at the level that we want to be at or have accomplished the things we want to accomplish. So I had the experience of this years ago. Again, I didn't really understand it until I got into all this work and I looked back, where I had wanted to do some real estate investing and buy some homes. Now, the area I lived in, it was a really small community, and there was a big hotel being built, and I knew that housing prices were going to go up, and I put an offer on a house, and it was so cheap. Like, thinking where prices are, what I could have bought this for is Anyway, so the place, it was like, I think it was accepted at like $123,000, like just absolutely ridiculous. And I hesitated and chickened out. And then I put an offer on another place at like similar numbers, and I hesitated and chickened out, right? And then sure enough, this hotel opened, the place boomed. Somebody had bought that house and then sold it 2 years later. They didn't do anything to it, and they sold it for like $399. Like, it was, from 120 some thousand to like 400,000 in a couple years with zero effort. And I saw it. I knew this was going to happen. Excuse me. So I joined a community where there were real estate investors, and some of these guys were doing 10, 20, 30 homes a year. One guy owned thousands of homes. Like, these guys were at a whole other level from where I was. But being in that environment, spending time listening to the way that they looked at it, the beliefs that they had, it just automatically leveled up my beliefs. Like, it changed what I focused on. It changed what I believed just from being around them and seeing what was possible, right? My fear was probably like fear of failing. I've never really dug into that one deeper, but if I was to guess, fear of failing, fear of making a bad decision, just some things like that, like maybe not being in the right move, not trusting myself, some of that stuff where I learned from these guys. You have to go for it. You learn from it. You can always fix a deal, whatever. And so I got in this environment. I went to one of their events. I came out. I immediately bought a house, flipped it, doubled my money on the investment, turned around, bought another house, and went from there. So this was kind of the second way to overcome self-sabotage is joining an environment. Now, I would say put those together. The visualizations are a quick, easy thing. A third way is getting the right coach, right? I told you about working with the client that I worked with. There's so many people out there that can support in mindset. Lots of great coaches. You just really want to work with somebody that understands self-sabotage, the root of it, has tools to help you be consistent. And if it's, this isn't medical diagnosis, right? But maybe there's a therapist or somebody like that you need, or something of that range. So, or the other way, actually, you know what? The last one is to just push through. Find a way to push through. And I'll give you an example. This is the last one. Is when I first started my first business. This is now 15, 16 years ago. I made the leap out of a job. I was miserable at this job. I just had to start a business, and then I didn't sell anything. And I got to this point where I was like struggling financially. I was in a really bad position. Clearly that showed up a couple times in my life. I was in this tough spot, but what it really came down to was I was procrastinating marketing and sales. I was just I was sabotaging my success. Now, later I discovered it was because I had this fear of rejection. I had a fear of selling. I had a fear of being salesy, being annoying, getting rejected, all these kinds of things, right? So I had all these fears, and so I was avoiding doing it. But I got to a place of such desperation, like it was actually so brutal that my choices were quit the business and go back to a soul-sucking job, or face my fears and get out there and sell. That was literally my choices. But to me, in my mind, quitting was failing. Like going back to that, I was like, I know that path, I can't do it. And it forced me. And I remember going door to door handing out flyers. And I was so nervous and I was just like, like it's so awkward. And then pretty quickly, I discovered that at that time I was selling like signs and businesses for printing. And quickly I discovered, as I went door to door, there were people that wanted signs and printing for their business, right? And so some of them started to thank me when I came to the door, because I would talk about their signs, I would talk about different stuff, and they'd be like, oh, thanks so much for coming in, because I was helping them. And I remember one day walking out and it was like, my brain was like, like they just thanked me and I was in there trying to sell, but wait a minute, selling is sleazy and selling is this, but they thanked me and they meant it. And it was like my beliefs were shifting. So the motivation of desperation forced me to get through my fears and my self-sabotage around sales, right? So that's a really powerful way if you get yourself into this place where you have to push through. Now, obviously, that's not sustainable. It's not something we want to do all the time. You don't want to just go disrupt your life to have to get in that, but deadlines and things like that are often a great way. You've probably had deadlines before and it forced you to get through. So real quick, what's coming up for you? Do you relate to this? Is this interesting? Comment below, subscribe if you want to get more videos like this. I'd love to hear from you, and let me know what you think. Did this video resonate? Did you learn from it? Most importantly, make a decision right now. Right now. Let's do a real quick thing. Close your eyes if you want. Take a deep breath. Exhale. Allow yourself to relax. Imagine a year from now. If you've got a problem or situation you're trying to deal with, imagine a year from now you were free from this. Imagine how you could feel, how life could be. Imagine how good it would feel to accomplish what you would want to accomplish. And notice how, as you just start to even think about that, imagine a moment, just make a moment up. And as you think about that, maybe you start to notice that your body language changes a little bit. Maybe you feel a little bit of positivity, a little something in there. Just notice how just a few seconds of doing this, maybe you just start to feel different. That's the power of just imagining and going towards what we can focus on. So I hope you enjoyed this. Check out my videos on visualization and reach out. Let me know what you think.